everyone, it's Justin again. You know, over the past few days, I've definitely seen a lot of religious buildings here in Queens, and they served so many different faiths. There are churches, temples, synagogues, and mosques for diverse people from all over the world. And seeing so many different religions represented in an area with so many different cultural groups got me thinking, what is the relationship between religion and culture? Before we begin, you should know, this lesson isn't going to analyze the faiths and belief systems of different cultures, but if you're interested, we do have other courses that explore world religions. Our mission today is to investigate how geographic forces and processes impact cultural groups and their religious systems. So, let's get into it. So, what is the connection between religion and geography? Let's examine some of the major religious groups of the world. Christianity, Islam, and Judaism share some common characteristics. They also all developed in Western Asia. Then there are the South Asian faiths of Hinduism, Sikhism, and Buddhism that developed in the Indian subcontinent. And finally, there are the Eastern philosophies such as Confucianism, Shinto, and Taoism, which developed in East Asia. You may be thinking, that isn't every religion, and you're totally right. There are countless other religions found all over the world. These just happen to be the largest. Let's take a second to make some comparisons. On the left-hand side of the screen, we've mapped out the modern countries where these religions originated. On the right-hand side, we have a map of the ancient cultural hearths. Do you notice anything? What do you think that means? You're right. There is some pretty significant overlap between these cultural hearths and the areas where the world's major religions developed. You may have inferred that these religions developed in these ancient cultural hearths, and guess what? You'd be right. While many of the world's major religions have a connection to ancient cultural hearths, the modern distribution of religion, though, is not so neatly organized. In fact, there are significant pockets of each spread across the globe. Want to guess what process this is a result of? We have a winner! That's right, it's cultural diffusion. The increasing interactions of different cultural groups resulting from globalization have allowed different religions to spread out from their cultural hearths. While trade and communication have played a role in the spread of different religions, processes like migration and colonization have had the greatest impact on that cultural diffusion. How do you think migration leads to the spread of different religions? Let's say a person from South Asia is a member of the Hindu faith and moves to a country like Great Britain that has historically identified as Christian. They wouldn't necessarily be forced to change faiths just because they migrated. Because of migration, Hinduism, which started in India, is now an element of culture in Great Britain. But historically speaking, colonization has been an important driver of religious diffusion. Early Muslim leaders spread Islam through Southwest Asia and North Africa. The Spanish brought Catholicism to Latin America and the Philippines during the Age of Exploration, and English settlers like the Pilgrims and the Puritans brought Christianity to what is now the United States. Now, as many of these colonizers brought their faiths to new regions, they also sometimes incorporated elements of the local traditional religion. Remember this painting by Marco Zapata of The Last Supper, an event familiar in Christianity from our previous lesson on language? He chose the indigenous food and drinks in the painting because they were important elements of the traditional indigenous religion. This process of one cultural group adopting elements of another culture is known as cultural integration. What justifications did colonizers use for this? Take a second to brainstorm some of your ideas. Well, this incorporation of local traditional religion may have been a strategy for converting people, as it would make the new religions seem more appealing and familiar, and may have made the new faith being introduced seem more inclusive as well. Or it could have been to make sure that the new religion would take root and become a long-term force in these colonized areas. How could indigenous communities retain aspects of their culture when colonizers introduced new religions? While religious conversion was often forced on indigenous communities by colonizing powers, incorporating indigenous religious elements allowed these communities to maintain a degree of connection to their cultural heritage. And sometimes this combining of traditional religious elements with different faiths resulted in new faiths. For example, Santeria is a religion that blends traditional elements of West African Yoruba religious practices with elements of Roman Catholicism. How do you think the introduction of new religions impacted traditional religions in the long term? As colonization took root, many of the elements and practices of the local traditional religions began disappearing. But how can thinking about and discussing the impact of cultural diffusion on religion help us navigate the 21st century? We could begin to look for shared experiences to connect with people who practice other religions, appreciate the diversity of beliefs and how they developed, and work towards increased tolerance for different faiths. These are crucial skills to help us peacefully coexist in an increasingly globalized world. Religion is something very personal, and each person gets to choose how they practice their beliefs. But religion also has a big impact on entire communities, influencing what people in those groups value, what they believe, and how they act. So, how does religion help shape the values, beliefs, and actions of these larger cultural groups? These faiths often act as moral guideposts for members, describing how people should act and behave. For example, Christianity and Judaism have the 10 Commandments. Have you ever heard of the Golden Rule? Treat others the way you want to be treated. Take a second to look at the image in your guided notes. What do you notice? Most different faiths have their own version of the rule. It's a way to remind members of the faith how to interact with other people. Can you think of any other examples of ways different religious faiths describe how members should act? The rules and guidelines of different religions also impact the daily lives of members, from diet to family structure. Maybe you've seen the terms halal or kosher at your supermarket before. These terms refer to the dietary restrictions that members of the Islamic and Jewish faiths must follow, respectively. For instance, both kosher and halal diets prohibit people from eating pork. Religion also impacts how families look, too. For example, some religions prohibit marrying someone from outside the faith. Others encourage multiple generations of families to live in the same house. How can these rules and shared behaviors help develop a sense of community among members of a religious group? Well, these rules and behaviors help create a shared identity among members of a religious group. During the holy season of Ramadan, many Muslims fast during the day. After sunset, these communities come together and have a big feast, helping foster a shared identity. Plus, when there are shared rules and behaviors, it makes social situations more predictable, and that helps build trust among group members. In some devout Jewish communities, members refrain from using technology like cars on Shabbats and holy days. This shared commitment to these traditions and behaviors helps build trust among community members as everyone adheres to the same expectations. And within these faiths, there are ways to resolve conflict between members and hold people accountable for breaking rules or hurting other people. Leaders of religious congregations often help members with things like marriage counseling and arguments between neighbors. And religion can even impact how countries govern themselves. Some countries are theocracies, ruled by religious leaders with laws that reflect the nation's religion. But religion can impact democracies too, especially when the country has a dominant faith. In the Republic of Ireland, divorce was not legalized until the year 1996 because the nation is predominantly Catholic, and the Catholic Church prohibits divorce. So, why would you say religion is such an important element for different cultural groups? Religion is an important cultural element that connects members of cultural groups, and it plays an essential role in developing their values, traditions, and customs. The religions of the world are some of the oldest and most important elements of culture, dating back to the earliest civilizations and spreading as humans migrated. And while trade, migration, and advancements in communication have helped to spread different religions and faiths, the process of colonization has had an enormous impact on the growth and spread of religion, often at the expense of traditional local religions. These different faiths are important to different cultural groups because they provide guidance and direction to navigate the world. People's diets, family structures, and legal systems are all impacted by these religions. The next time I see you, we're going to take a closer look at issues around ethnicity and nationality. But until then, remember to keep exploring. See you next time. Hey, hey.